Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
At halftime, Barcelona looked to be in control after Lewandowski had put them ahead with a penalty. But Erik ten Hag showed his masterful in-game management once again, allowing United to secure a 2-1 win and a 4-3 aggregate to go through to the next round. But how exactly did ten Hag change the game? Well, let's take a look at United's tactics in possession. Here's how both sides lined up for the most part in the first half. And initially, Barcelona were quite aggressive in the press, as Lewandowski pressing Martinez was often joined by Roberto coming in off the left-hand side, whilst Shaw was operating more as a traditional fullback and Rafinha would look to cover. In the midfield, Casemiro tended to be the single pivot, supported by Fred and Sancho, but because Roberto was the man applying the pressure initially, Barcelona could afford to go more man-to-man in the midfield, making it difficult for United to progress through the centre. Shaw's positioning, higher and on the left-hand side, in combination with being picked up by Rafinha, made him much more difficult to pick out, and as a result, Wan-Bissaka of the two fullbacks was more of the outlet, so he could initially drop in to create a back three, allowing them to have a 3 versus 2 against the Barcelona front 2 press. So here we see a perfect example of just that, with Roberto having been supporting the press alongside Lewandowski, whilst the midfield is also roughly man-to-man. So, it was obvious that Wan-Bissaka was a natural outlet, and Barcelona wanted to suffocate United in this first phase, so they were willing to take an even bigger gamble in the press, with Balde, rather than staying at left back, pushing all the way up onto Wan-Bissaka, allowing Christensen and the rest of the back three to come across, and Barcelona held a fairly high line. In the first half, Barcelona could be confident with this pressing shape for a few key reasons. We see that Balde is able to push up onto Wan-Bissaka and Roberto continues to apply pressure onto Varane, whilst we still have a man-to-man situation in the midfield as well. So it's extremely difficult for United to play through. So regarding the personnel, the first reason Barcelona were more confident in pressing is that Wan-Bissaka is not great on the ball, so under pressure he was more likely to lose possession either through poor decision making or a poor pass. Fernandes is obviously a great player, but pace in behind is not his strength, so Christensen could confidently drop deep with Fernandes, knowing he was unlikely to spin in behind and burn him, and instead the focus would be on preventing Fernandes turning and using his passing range to find somebody else. This decision was also made easier by the fact that Weghorst is not quick enough to make the most of this space, especially with the pacey Araujo playing centrally, while Sancho's runs could be easily tracked by De Jong if they did come, as Sancho is also not the quickest. But United still had some success down this right-hand side even in the first half, and that was primarily on the transition where Barcelona had been attacking much more, and this would mean that Fernandes, despite not being the paciest, would still find enough space behind Balde to cause danger. So Barcelona had been attacking, and Balde gambles and stays high up, meaning that Fernandes is now the free man, and he attacks the space. He's quickly found, and unlike where it was a more controlled press from Barcelona, in transition Christensen didn't have the time to come across and cover Fernandes, whilst even Balde couldn't recover in time. And this led to a big chance that was well saved. And this general play may be one of the weaknesses ten Hag identified when making adjustments in the second. But generally in the first, this positioning meant there was limited pace down this right-hand side of Barcelona's, and their paciest player was out on the left and was the most difficult pass to find with the switch. And in addition, because Balde was pressing high, Koundé tended to stay deeper, so their paciest player was the most well protected as well. When United did get high up in controlled possession, their attacking shape could look something like this, with Casemiro almost always the single pivot, allowing Sancho and Fred higher up the pitch. Rashford down the left-hand side was happy to hug the touchline, and Shaw would react to Rashford as he could go wide if Rashford was more central, but we often saw him occupy more of the half space. Fernandes on the right-hand side wouldn't stick wide, of course, because he is much more comfortable in the centre, so he tended to drift in earlier, and Balde as well as Roberto could often join him there, because Wan-Bissaka would be slow to join the attack, and this general shape allowed Barcelona to protect the centre more efficiently in that first half. So what exactly changed in the second half? In possession, the actual patterns of play were tweaked rather than overhauled. The biggest differences were more to do with the personnel, and Antony's introduction for Weghorst meant that it was now Rashford who could occupy the centre forward position, Fernandes in his more natural attacking midfield position, and Sancho drifted back out to the left hand side. This now meant that United had genuine pace through the centre as well as out on the right hand side, whilst Barcelona remained committed to pressing with 2 men initially. But that wasn't the end of it, as Wan-Bissaka was now operating differently. Rather than always looking to remain deep as the third centre back, he pushed higher up initially to operate as a more traditional fullback. So when De Gea was on the ball, if the centre backs were occupied, he was an easier outlet option. But more pertinently, Barcelona did not immediately adjust their pressing shape to United's changes. So we still saw Balde being drawn high up the pitch and the back three looking to shift across. But again, now we had genuine pace through the centre of the pitch as well as the right hand side from United, so they could more confidently look to knock the ball in behind for the pace of Antony or Rashford to latch onto, leading to several dangerous situations. But it wasn't just in the transition that United looked more dangerous. Time and again, with Sergi Roberto still being caught central either high up or in a more tucked in position when United had the ball, would allow Wan-Bissaka as the attacking fullback to contribute much more, as he could now push high, looking to cause 2 versus 1s against Balde. Or if Balde was drawn high early onto Wan-Bissaka, we did see some occasions where Antony, even from higher up, more settled situations, would then be able to drag the centre backs across, so Barcelona were losing their compactness and solid defensive structure where they would shift from side to side. This increased impact from right back was part of the reason Ten Hag brought on Dalot, who is a much more attacking fullback than Wan-Bissaka, as he really wanted to press this advantage home. The change shape also meant that Fernandes was now operating in his more natural free attacking midfielder role, so he could drift to the left and to the right, looking for any way to make a difference. So in the second half, we saw more key passes as well as more touches in general from Fernandes, and his touch map shows that he was more involved everywhere around the pitch. Eventually, Barcelona adapted to this right-hand side overload, with Ferran, a more genuine winger who could start wider coming across to help out Balde in these defensive situations, but it was too little too late. Overall, Ten Hag showed once again that his in-game management is one of his strongest suits, though Xavi's lack of adaptation down their left-hand side was surprising. But if you want to dig more into what Xavi's tactics were in possession, and how Ten Hag also shifted United's defensive shape to help this turnaround, stick around for part 2, which is probably out by the time you watch this, and linked in the top right card now.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out.
And a special thanks to my latest patrons like Finn J, Lau, Tiong Yi, Dogba Bass, James Lang, Ahmed Assad, and Rodrigo Martinez.